Hello everybody. So in this video we'll begin to deal with the state equivalence by the way. So for state equivalence is what we have mentioned last meeting, that we will begin to minimize from a given DFA we'll begin to automaton will begin to remove those redundant features, since the if two different if two I mean, if the states do have redundant states do have the same meaning, for example, in which we can definitely merge them, because redundant states is actually um, if those states don't change with the specific strings, which will be, for example, from Q0 um, down to Q1 will be A, then Q2 down to Q1 will be A. We can merge actually to become Q2, for example, then down to Q1, it will become A still. We can do it like that. If ever, if we're just, doing in layman's terms, for example, if merging them. But in state governance, we will begin to deal the minimization for this. We can minimize the states for the. We have to remember that we need um, to observe those equivalents to do have the previous discussion. Those, for example, the M1, the language of your M1 is also equals to the language of your M2. That means to say they are having the right invariance. What will be the string of your they are related. Your X, the string of your X, and the Y of the Y string of your Y, the string of your Y is related to the X of strings. So that is actually the concept of the right equivalence invariance. And we can also make sure to always remember that we can definitely always remember here. Can remember here then for the those concept, which is the I forgot. Let me just check in the this is distinguishable rather. When I say distinguishable, in our narrowed my here we do have Q0, the non-final state, and final state. They are also considered as distinguishable. But here in the state equivalence, if, for example, if Q0 um, Q1, then Q2 down to this is A and this is A. So if you'll begin to check their QA, then Q2A, they are actually we cannot do anything because that will goes to Q1 and Q1. But if ever that when we say Q0 to A, and it will be different, and Q0 to Q2A will be different as well. So we can say later on, it depends. Actually, the situation we'll begin to run through that how distinguishable being defined. That will be in our next later on. We'll begin to run through how it works. So afterwards, we will also try to minimize using the K-equivalence. In our K-equivalence, actually, I know that you're quite familiar in how to work on that, because in your zero equivalent, make sure to be aware that zero equivalence, excuse me, based on the final, based ka on final and non-final. So you will begin to mark, you'll begin to check that later on. I'll begin to run through. Then the one equivalence is actually based on equivalence zero, where transitions lead. Compare the transition of for each symbol. the two states stay equivalent if their transition could be the same EO. So, for example, if um, earlier Q0 down to Q1 and Q1, no, no, Q0 input A down to Q1 and Q2 input A is Q1. This is actually not considered as distinguishable. If Q0A and Q2A direct to Q1 and this it will direct to Q3, so this is distinguishable. So that's how it works. So we'll begin to run through that later on. So I'll begin to do it step by step so that you will really understand how does it work. For the We'll begin to see here the transition of one equivalence, considering that the distinguishable and not distinguishable, if they are equal, they are having the right invariant, we cannot um, do something. We'll begin to illustrate that in your two equivalence, um, you will also base into the one equivalence, and for the three equivalence, we base into the equivalence if ever that your equivalence actually, your answers for checking the equivalence is always the same with the second equivalence, then pag check mo sa equivalence 3, it is the same with equivalence 2, you will stop in equivalence 3. Make sure that you will always validate that one. K plus 1, it must be like that as always. You have to always check that because considering that um, we're just certainly assuming that this is the this is the loop wherein we begin to stop. However, we're not able to really check